Okay, Philip Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. Today is the 24th of April, 2021. It's a Saturday. And what I want to talk about today is the movement toward making Washington, D.C. a state that's happening right now and how it corresponds to things that happened during the Reconstruction era. So, Lloyd, let's go ahead and get started on that. Earlier today, I wrote my Congress lady to ask if she would have voted for Washington, D.C. statehood if she believed that the city would add two new Republican senators. Now, she did vote for statehood because she's a Democrat. 120 years ago, South Carolina's last carpetbag governor asked a nearly identical question to fellow Republicans in a 1901 Atlantic magazine article. Massachusetts native, Yale graduate, and Skull and Bone Society member Daniel Chamberlain had been out of office for 25 years when he wrote of his party's 1867 Reconstruction Acts that led to the corrupted puppet state governments in the South through the manipulation of the ex-slave vote during Reconstruction. Quote, underneath all of the avowed motives and all of the open arguments lay the true will and determination to secure Republican Party ascendency and control at the South and in the nation through the Negro vote. If this is a hard saying, let anyone now ask himself or ask the public if it is possibly credible that the Reconstruction Acts would have been passed if the Negro vote had been believed to be democratic, close quote. It should be noted that the Reconstruction Acts only required universal black registration in the former Confederate states. Northern states were exempted, even though they had far fewer blacks as a percent of their populations. Thus, Republicans did not seek black suffrage throughout the country. No, no, no. That came later, only when it became clear that blacks could be largely quarantined in the South, where 90% of them remained until 1910, which was 45 years after the war had ended. Some Republicans, such as New York Senator Roscoe Conkling, openly admitted that Southern black suffrage was intended to keep blacks out of the North. In 1866, he said, quote, 4 years ago, mobs were raised upon the idea that emancipated Negroes were to burst upon the North. We said, give them liberty and rights in the South, and they will stay there, close quote. While today's GOP understands that the House recently voted for D.C. statehood because Democrats want to gain control of the U.S. Senate, modern Republicans persist in believing that their party championed black civil rights during Reconstruction out of a moral impulse, even though it did nothing for other minorities such as Chinese Americans, Native Americans, and even the immigrants who had settled in the big cities of the North. Consequently, modern Republicans readily sacrifice Confederate statues in a futile hope of preventing the Democrats from escalating cancel culture to other American traditions and symbols. Consider Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, who is now falsely accused of suppressing black votes by supporting a new act to provide voter integrity in his state. In truth, the percentage of black Georgians who are registered to vote, as well as those who actually do vote, is higher than the national average. In 2018, when black gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams claimed the election was stolen from her, 65% of Georgia blacks were registered to vote as compared to 60% nationally. That's a 5% differential, 5 percentage point differential. Similarly, 56% of black Georgians voted that year as compared to only 48% nationally. That's an 8 percentage point differential. In truth, the new Georgia law expands voting rights beyond those in such states as New York, where Major League Baseball is headquartered, and Delaware, which is President Biden's home state. Nonetheless, Georgia Republicans are abused by cancel culture. Major League Baseball withdrew their All-Star game from Atlanta. Leading Georgia corporations such as Delta Airlines and Coca-Cola condemned the state GOP as racist, and Hollywood producers boycott the state for the same phony reason. If corporate media is any guide, Americans imagine Georgia to be a morally depraved state where the average white attends weekly KKK meetings secretly. Notwithstanding such abuse, Governor Kemp appointed two new members to the Stone Mountain Confederate Memorial Association, who seemed to be determined to remove the bas reliefs of Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee, and Jefferson Davis from the face of the mountain. Georgia State Representative Billy Mitchell, who has introduced a bill that would enable the carvings to be removed, has said of the new appointees, quote, "I think they are great choices by this governor," close quote. In sum, it appears that Governor Kemp's Stone Mountain Association appointments reflect continued Republican Party dismissal of Southern culture. The voter tally in January's Georgia runoff elections that gave Democrats two new Senate seats in Washington were close. The margin in one race was 1% and it was 2% in the other. Notwithstanding that Confederate statues had been under consistent assault in the state, neither Republican candidate said anything in defense of the memorials. Perhaps they lost their elections because voters who do want to honor Confederate ancestors declined to participate or maybe even voted for Democrats. I wouldn't blame them if they did. If so, the consequence is that the Democrat Party may now have the power nationally to 1. Stack the Supreme Court, 2. Win statehood for Washington, D.C., 3. Eliminate freedom of speech, 4. Take away the right to bear arms, 5. Dictate voting requirements in all states, 6. Indoctrinate our schools and institutions with bogus critical race theory, which at its root is simply anti-American history. The escalation of cancel culture might have been arrested if Americans had made a sober assessment of Southern symbols 5 years ago, when the politically ambitious Nikki Haley removed the Confederate flag from South Carolina's state capitol grounds. Instead, a false narrative took control because cancel culture censored dissenting voices. When have you read an editorial or even an op-ed in the New York Times or the Washington Post defending Confederate memorials? Think about it. The result has been an ecstasy of sanctimony that led to the mob destruction of century-old memorials with no legal consequences for the mobsters. Yeah, they are mobsters, and the mobsters have now taken control of our government. Let's look at this over the long term. During Reconstruction, the Republican Party sponsored black suffrage because it gave them political power. It gave them control of 11 states with puppet regimes. Gradually, they let go of that power because the states that came into the Union thereafter, the first 11 states that came into the Union after the start of the Civil War, each one of them entered into the Union with two new Republican senators. The Republican Party had control of the federal government from the start of the Civil War to the Great Depression, with one exception. That was Woodrow Wilson's administration. And when he was president, he did lower the tariffs, which was a major objective of the southern states because the southern states had an export economy. Low tariffs encouraged overseas buyers to buy U.S. cotton because that would give them an opportunity with low tariffs to sell merchandise to the United States, thereby generating the exchange credits they needed to buy American cotton. But what happened when the Republican Party took control in the post-Civil War era particularly during the uh, Johnson administration when they overrode all his vetoes, and during the Grant administration. What you had there was the establishment of party control that lasted, 75 years, long term. And that is what we're facing now. That is the threat that we are facing now. And I can't predict. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's certainly close to happening because of the 50-50 split in Congress, in the Senate. If they get Washington, D.C. admitted as a state, then all of a sudden you've got 52 Democrats in the Senate versus 50. And they can just simply go with an arithmetic majority and ignore all previous norms within Congress, such as the filibuster and that sort of thing. So we could face a long-term control of the federal government by the Democrats here. And what they offer, of course, is tyranny, no freedom of speech. Now, some people will say, "Oh, well, Phil, you were wrong. There was a Democrat president between, other than Woodrow Wilson before the Great Depression. Yes, Grover Cleveland, but he was ineffective. He did absolutely nothing. He tried to get tariffs reduced and just went nowhere." So, if you want to learn more about that, get Southern Reconstruction by Philip Lee. It's $22 at Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and $25 if you want an autographed copy from me personally. And if you're in the United States, I'll deliver it free of charge for $25. But you must email me if you want that autographed copy. Phil, PHIL _ Lee, LEIGH @ me.com. Okay, that's our show for today, and thanks for watching.